Okay, we're going to move to our next speaker here real quick, and we're going to have to hustle to stay on anywhere close to reasonable time, but appreciate all the comments, and these next two talks are a little bit shorter, so we should be okay in terms of time. Our next speaker is Dr. Brad Walmsley. Brad's a research scientist with AGBU in Australia, and represents part of the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries investment in the AGBU joint venture with the University of New England. Brad originates from the northern tablelands of New South Wales off a family beef cattle farming operation that has been in the beef cattle business for about 110 years. Within AGBU, Brad is responsible for the R&D into breeding objectives and selection indexes for beef cattle within the breed plan genetic evaluation system, including the continued development and support of the industry application of BreedObject technology. BreedObject has been applied across all major beef breeds in Australia and internationally in some breeds. Brad originally joined New South Wales DPI in 2008 as a livestock research officer in the livestock systems unit. He's had strong involvement in the development of phenotypic prediction tools and maternal productivity research conducted by the former CRC for beef cattle technologies in Australia. We're excited to have Brad as a part of our program, and look forward to his comments here. So, Brad.
Thank you for the introduction, Bob. And before I begin, I would also like to thank you and BIF for the invitation to speak at this conference. Today I'm going to provide you with a brief history of BreedObject and some recent developments we've undertaken. BreedObject is the software used by the Breed Plan Genetic Evaluation System for developing selection indexes that are targeted at improving profitability in commercial production systems. For those of you that are unaware, Breed Plan is a genetic evaluation system that has been developed in Australia and used extensively both within Australia and internationally. It is based on a multi-trait BLUP evaluation model that includes traits such as calving ease, growth, fertility, feed efficiency, carcass quality, and in some breeds, temperament. Currently, there are 80 BreedObject selection indexes in use across 1.8 million seed stock in Australia and 3.2 million seed stock internationally. In a 2003 study, it was demonstrated that this genetic evaluation system had generated $861 million worth of net benefit to the Australian beef industry. Of that, $287 million was attributed to being directly accrued by Australian beef producers. When focusing more directly on BreedObject selection indexes, a study by Robert Banks in 2005 demonstrated that BreedObject and its indexes had had a large impact on profitability in the Australian beef industry. This rate of improvement was occurring at $1.79 per cow per year in the interval from 1999 to 2004. In our leading herds over the same interval, they were closer to $5 per cow per year. These figures are supported by a more recent study conducted by Robert Banks in 2015. In the graphic, I'm showing you profitability as described by the index on the y-axis and a time interval of 1994 to 2014 on the x-axis. The trend is the average trend in profitability for the Southern Australian beef breeds, and on average was going at a rate of $2.83 per cow per year. A more recent update of these figures indicates that this has improved to $4 per cow per year. In our better herds, they're often doing above $5 per cow per year, and in our very best herds, they're achieving over $8 per cow per year. These figures demonstrate that the Breed Plan Genetic Evaluation System and BreedObject indexes have generated profitability gains for the Australian beef industry. However, change is constant. Across time, markets and production systems evolve, genetic change occurs, priorities move, meaning that new traits become important. All these things mean there is always room for improvement. Today, I'd like to talk to you about how we are evolving the BreedObject system to better cope with the realities of commercial production. To do that, I'd firstly like to provide you with a brief history concerning BreedObject. I'd then like to talk about some recent developments we've made to the BreedObject system, and I'd like to leave you with some future plans. Research into the development of BreedObject began during the 1980s and ultimately led to BreedObject being released and used in the beef industry during the 1990s. BreedObject is dependent on a few fundamentals, which I will briefly step through for you during the next few slides. The outcome from any mating is a new combination of genes that enter the commercial production system and play an essential role in determining the performance of any individual, whether that be during the cow-calf phase of their life, the grow-out phase, or in the case of slaughter animals, the finishing phase, and also for replacement heifers when they return to the cow herd. Genes play therefore an essential role in the success of the beef industry in delivering a quality product to our customers at the end of the chain. The genes interact during all phases of this production cycle, and for this reason BreedObject has always taken the perspective that we value gene effects across the whole commercial production system from birth to slaughter, including the cow herd. Given the focus of BreedObject is the commercial production system, the driving force behind BreedObject is the profit equation. This includes income generated by products that come out of the commercial production system, as well as the costs incurred to produce those products. The profit equation is influenced by many traits to varying degrees, and this can change between commercial production systems. The various state departments of agriculture across Australia have a long history of examining those traits which impact on commercial profitability. We've taken advantage of this work to help us determine which are the most appropriate traits for inclusion in BreedObject selection indexes. When looking at the cow-calf segment of the commercial production system, the traits of the calf which we consider to be important are its ability to be born, the growth it displays up to weaning, and the feed resources required to express this growth. When looking at the cow, the traits we consider to be important are her ability to go in calf, her ability to have a live calf, her ability to then raise that calf, and also how her weight cycles throughout that time interval. Again, the feed resources required for that cow to express these levels of production are also considered important. It has been well demonstrated that cows tend not to break even until they reach something like 4 to 5 years of age. Given this, cow survival is also considered an important trait in the commercial production system. When we move to the grow-out segment of the commercial system, the growth of that individual and the feed resources required to achieve that level of production are considered important. Again, when we move into the finishing phase, the growth displayed by that animal and the feed resources required to achieve that growth are again important. However, in the finishing system, traits of importance also include carcass quality traits, such as the yield of that animal, the marbling that that animal displays, its ability to satisfy market specifications, and its dressing percentage. Feed requirements within BreedObject have always been modelled using the Australian feeding standards. This began in the initial versions of BreedObject with the feeding standards released by John Corbett in 1990, which has been upgraded to those released more recently by Mike Freer in 2007. The commercial production environment in Australia is characterised by a large level of environmental diversity. I've tried to show that here by the arid conditions faced by some animals, right down to more lush conditions seen in southern Australia. As a consequence, in Australia we rely on various ways of finishing cattle, such as feedlotting segments down to pasture finishing segments. I've provided this table to try and demonstrate this diversity in the Australian commercial production environment. You can see here the range for various traits. Ones of particular interest are the differences in fertility rates across the country. Others include the levels of heifer retention rates required to maintain herd sizes. And another one of particular importance is the feed cost variability across the country. In comparison, the environment in which many seed stock enterprises operate is generally, but not always, of higher quality, allowing for greater expression of trait variability, particularly around those growth traits. Another point of comparison is the intended purpose of commercial animals is ultimately to become a meat product. In contrast, the animals sold out of a seed stock enterprise are intended to be breeding stock for the commercial system. The consequence of this diversity in production characteristics and the different intended purposes of animals from commercial enterprises compared to those from the seed stock enterprises means the BreedObject is being constructed with two types of traits. The first are objective traits, which are those that are desirable to be improved because they impact profitability. The second type are selection criteria, which are traits that are able to be measured in the seed stock sector and analysed, and importantly, they are related to those traits which improve profit in the objective. As an example, cow weaning rate is a trait that has been demonstrated to have large impacts on commercial profitability. Consequently, it is one of the traits that are included in BreedObject selection indexes. However, cow weaning rate is either a lifetime trait of the cow or a trait of the herd, which make it a little bit difficult for genetic evaluation. In order to consider fertility, breed plan uses two traits: days to calving, which is the time period elapsed between the bull end date and the subsequent calving event in a natural mating system, and scrotal circumference in young bulls. Both of these traits are more easily measurable compared to cow weaning rate in the seed stock sector, and importantly, they are both related to cow weaning rate. When evaluating the economics of traits in BreedObject, it is recognised that one size does not fit all. Some traits have pricing structures that have optimas, such as fat specifications. Other traits have differing pricing structures, such as marble score. I'm showing you an example here of the marble score system that's implemented in BreedObject. On the y-axis we have the price premium above the base carcass price, and on the x-axis we have Australian Ausmeat marble score. You can see that as we move up in marble score, the price premium paid changes shape in a very non-linear fashion. This has been implemented in BreedObject since the early 2000s to cater for different pricing structures. Just to briefly summarise, the approach taken during the development of BreedObject has been based around these four characteristics. The whole commercial production system is model. Profitability in that commercial production system drives BreedObject, and it always includes costs, and in particular feed costs. The traits considered by BreedObject are broken into two categories: the breeding objective traits, which are desired to be improved because they impact commercial profitability, and the selection criteria traits, which are those traits that are measurable in the seed stock herds, analysed by breed plan, and are importantly related to the breeding objective traits. It has also been recognised that a one-size-fits-all approach to the economics of traits considered in BreedObject is not effective, and as such we have catered for non-linear economic values to be developed for traits within BreedObject. Next, I'd like to step you through the developments we've made within the BreedObject software. The major development within BreedObject has centred around providing better description of the feed costs that are associated with the commercial production sector. This has entailed the inclusion of all feed costs, including net feed intake, in the breeding objective for all breeds. For those breeds that record NFI data, the facility has also been developed to allow them to include NFI EBVs as selection criteria traits in their selection indexes. To achieve this inclusion of all feed costs within BreedObject, we've enhanced the modelling systems employed. This includes enhancing the modelling system that describes young animal growth through the pasture phase and into the feedlot finishing phase. It also includes an enhanced modelling system for valuing cow weight, and it now includes a modelling system for describing cow condition score at the point of mating. I'm now going to step you through the developments that have occurred in the modelling systems used to describe young animal growth across time. To do that, I'm going to use an example production system that includes a pasture-based grow-out phase and a feedlot finishing phase. Traditionally, we've included calving ease as one of our breeding objective traits, and from that point of birth, we've modelled the animal's growth across time to the point of sale. We also model beyond that for cow weight, but I'll deal with cow weight a little bit later. From here, when we've examined the economics of sale weight, we've examined it across the entire trajectory of that young animal's lifetime. That means we've been operating under the inherent assumption that the feed costs associated with the cow-calf segment are equivalent to those feed costs in the grow-out phase, which are in turn equivalent to those feed costs within the finishing phase. This may not be inherently sensible. To address this, we have now included in our breeding objective traits weaning weight and, where applicable, feedlot entry weight. This allows us to examine the economics of improving weaning weight while birth weight and entry weight remain unchanged. We can also examine the economics of improving entry weight with weaning weight and final sale weight remaining unchanged. And finally, we can examine the economics of improving sale weight while all other weights across an animal's lifetime remain unchanged. This allows us to examine the impact that improving weaning weight, entry weight and finished sale weight have on commercial profitability independent of the other weight traits. It also allows us to compartmentalise the feed costs that are associated with each segment of the commercial beef production system, and therefore get a better representation of the overall feed costs of the whole commercial production system. The second area where we have made developments to the modelling systems used within BreedObject is surrounding cow weight. The economic value for cow weight encompasses three attributes: the feed required for maintaining her weight on any given day, the feed for changing her weight, and the returns received from cows that are considered surplus to requirements. These three attributes have to be considered at constant performance of other traits, such as fertility or cow body condition score. The feed costs associated with the cow have to be considered over the whole production year. The effect varies across the year and is therefore not constant, and across the lifetime of the cow. A cow is maintained in a herd for a given number of years, and that has to be factored in. We model average cow weight across an annual production cycle, and within that cycle we have two periods. We have a period that is surplus feed, and feed is essentially considered zero cost, and a period where feed is limited and it comes at a cost. Cow live weight goes through an annual pattern of change as that cow moves from mating to weaning her calf to having her next calf and then her subsequent mating. The pattern of that weight change isn't actually the most important factor in the economics surrounding cow live weight. Any genetic improvements in cow live weight that have been achieved at the point of mating have been assumed to result in the same increase in cow live weight at the point in the year when she is at her heaviest, meaning that the change coming from genetics is equal throughout the entire production cycle. Research conducted here in Australia by the Beef Cooperative Research Centre recorded cow live weights across consecutive annual production cycles. This data has allowed us to examine this relationship. Our finding has been that if we were to increase cow live weight at mating through genetics by 1 kilogram, that cow would actually be more than 1 kilogram heavier at the point in the annual production cycle she's at her heaviest. That means that cow live weight change due to genetics is not constant throughout the annual production cycle. This holds for both temperate and tropical production systems. Another way to present this finding is to describe how the feeding standards deal with cow live weight change and its associated cow body condition score changes across the annual production cycle. Again, I've presented to you a stylised pattern of cow live weight change across the annual cycle, and above it I'm showing you the associated changes in cow body condition score at certain points in time. As a starting point, let's assume this cow has a live weight of 1100 pounds at the point of weaning. If we take a second cow who weighs 1540 pounds at the point of weaning, and she has a pattern of cow live weight change throughout the year such that she's able to be at the same cow body condition scores as the first cow at different points during the year, then at mating she will be 380 pounds heavier than the first cow. She will be 440 pounds heavier than the first cow at weaning, and 480 pounds heavier at the point in the annual production cycle these cows are at their heaviest. This means that the second cow has had to put on 100 more pounds than the first cow to go from her lightest at body condition score 3 to her heaviest at body condition score 6. In other research conducted by the Beef Cooperative Research Centre examining when during a cow's lifetime they achieved their lowest cow body condition score, found that they tended to clump into these peaks. And these peaks are associated with the annual mating event in Northern Australia, and it was a consistent result for both Brahmans and tropical composites. To cater for this finding, we've included cow body condition score at mating as a breeding objective trait in BreedObject. The modelling system that we use for that is shown in front of you. In this, we ask the user to provide us the mean of their herd at calving to give us a minimum desired condition score and a maximum desired condition score. Above that maximum represents higher condition than needed and is essentially wasted feed for that level of production of the cow. Just below the minimum condition score is an area that is lower than desired and represents an area that requires extra supplementary feed to get those cows back into the desired range. Below that is a second area that's considered critically low and a welfare issue, and those cows are considered to leave the herd and be a cost. These developments allow us to do several things, the first of which is to examine the impact the genetic improvement has had on the feed requirement and therefore the feed costs of commercial production systems. As an example, I'm showing you the genetic trend for cow feed requirement within the Australian Angus breed between 1985 and 2015. When comparing the 1985 cow to the 2015 cow, this positive genetic trend represents an increase of 1.88 kilograms per day dry matter if we assume the energetic quality of the feed is 10 megajoules per kilogram. When we add the calf to this scenario, this is the genetic trend we get for feed requirement for the cow-calf unit. When comparing the 1985 cow-calf unit to the equivalent 2015 cow-calf unit, and assuming that the energetic quality of the feed is again 10 megajoules, we can see that that represents an increase of 1.25 kilograms per day per cow-calf unit between 1985 and 2015. The other is tailoring the responses seen in the traits to better align with the cost structures of the commercial production system. I'm going to use an Angus example here, focusing in on the growth traits of birth weight, 200 day, 400 day, 600 day weight and mature cow weight. When setting cow supplementary feed costs at $100 per tonne, we get reductions in birth weight, increases in the three growth traits and negligible changes in mature cow weight. When we reduce feed costs to $40 per tonne, we see negligible changes in birth weight, much larger changes in the growth traits and increases in mature cow weight. In contrast, when setting feed costs at $160 per tonne, we expect large decreases in birth weight and mature cow weight, negligible changes in 200 and 400 day weight, and small reductions in 600 day weight. As a comparison, when feed costs were set at $160 a tonne before these developments were undertaken, the pattern seen in trait responses much more aligned to the pattern seen for when feed costs are set at $40 a tonne in the new system as opposed to when they're set at $160 a tonne. At a practical level, this means that the rankings of size are sensitive to the supplementary feed price within a production system. The graphic I'm showing you here demonstrates how the rankings of two size change as we increase feed price from $0 per tonne up to $320 per tonne. The Australian Hereford Association has been able to use these changes in BreedObject to develop selection indexes where they get good changes in growth traits, negligible change in mature cow weight, while still getting good changes in other production traits such as calving ease, fertility and carcass quality. Other developments in BreedObject, which I haven't had the time today to expand on, include building on those developments around feed costing to include methane modelling. We've also enhanced our market specifications to allow all traits to have non-linear economic values if that is appropriate. The Australian Wagyu Association, in its International Wagyu Evaluation, has utilised the developments around feed costings and the non-linearity of carcass specifications to develop indexes for different purposes within its breed. These are the breeder index, the self-replacing index and the F1 terminal index, and these three indexes have different purposes and consequently they have different responses in the traits. As you can see here, the response for the breeder index is very large in the growth traits but negligible for marble score. In contrast, in the F1 terminal index there's negligible change in the growth traits and large changes in marble score. We've also developed the facility to determine the effect that culling for specific traits such as structure and docility has on commercial profitability. Finally, I'd like to describe some plans for future research and development of BreedObject. Work began in 2019 on redevelopment of the feeding standards within Australia. Once these are complete, they'll be integrated into the BreedObject indexes. We've also developed the capacity to construct across-breed indexes. This will be driven by the outputs from two projects, the Repronomics project in Northern Australia and the Southern Multi-Breed project in Southern Australia, involving the breeds that I've shown in the pictures below. Driven by feedback such as that displayed on the screen, we've been looking at alternative ways of demonstrating the effect that an animal's genes have on commercial profitability. This has led to the development of a software system called Desirable, which Laura Penrose will talk about in the next presentation. Traditionally, the equation for indexes has been written out as the EBVs multiplied by their respective economic importance. Alternatively, if the economic importance of EBVs has been derived while considering the economic importance of all other EBVs, the EBVs can be formed into subgroups to demonstrate the effect an animal will have on particular components of a commercial production system. These subgroups can then be added together to demonstrate the effect that animal will have on total profitability within the commercial production system. If we look at the index below, its EBVs could be grouped into subgroups, which may be describing the animal's impact on fertility, growth, or carcass. These subgroups can be then added together and that is equivalent to the original index. There are many possible ways that EBVs can be subgrouped. Some logical combinations could include those traits that affect on-farm profitability and those traits that affect off-farm profitability. There could well be other combinations also. In a study we've conducted, we've examined the effect that grouping traits in on-farm and off-farm categories has on long-term response to selection. In this study, we used 3 scenarios to examine the effect that subgrouping has on long-term response to selection. In the first scenario, we allowed both the seed stock and commercial sectors to select on index. We've labelled that I and I. In the second scenario, the seed stock sector selected on index, while the commercial sector were allowed to select on subgroups, and we've labelled that I and S. And in the third scenario, both the seed stock and commercial producers were selecting on the subgroup, and we've labelled that S and S. This graphic demonstrates the trend in profitability as described by the index across a 20-year time horizon, when both the seed stock and commercial sectors were allowed to select on index. When the seed stock sector selected on index and the commercial sector selected on subgroup, we saw a 17% depression in the improvement in profitability. When both the seed stock sector and the commercial sector were selecting on subgroup, we saw a 57% depression in the gains in profitability. The learnings from this study, when focusing on profitability gains, were that it was critical for the seed stock sector to select using indexes. There is also some scope for commercial bull breeders to then use subgroups. However, the best result is always achieved by using selection indexes. I'd like to acknowledge Steve Barwick and Tony Hensel, my predecessors in the BreedObject space, as well as Meat and Livestock Australia, who provided the funding for these developments of BreedObject to occur. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues in AGBU, New South Wales DPI and the University of New England, as well as the respective breed societies whose data I've used as examples in this presentation. I'd like to leave you with some final remarks. BreedObject and its selection indexes have had demonstrable positive impacts on beef profitability within Australia. The developments we have made to BreedObject provide us with a more rigorous and flexible description of commercial production systems. This allows us to better tailor selection indexes to different production system and target market niches. We also have future research and development plans for BreedObject, which we envisage will add further utility to how BreedObject selection indexes will help drive gains in commercial profitability into the future. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation.
Great, thanks, Brad. That was excellent. Appreciate you being online here too to answer some questions. We'll see. Look over here in the chat box and see if we've got any spooled up. I don't see any right off, but I do have one, and that's sort of related to kind of how you envision incorporating. You mentioned some methane work and lots of folks interested in that, I think, both from the sustainability space, but also as a way to potentially capture calories that would ordinarily get blown off as methane or other waste gases, and use those calories for profitable beef production. How are you going about that, Brad?
Thanks, Bob. We've already included that in there, so that's in there as an option for people to use if they choose so. We're not making it a mandatory part. It's an option for them. How we've done that is we've focused on methane yield as the objective trait for improvement. We don't have any EBVs available. Like the phenotypes are just not there in Australia to report EBVs, but we've had research done that has allowed us to use correlations that we know between the objective traits and current EBVs, so the methane objective traits and current EBVs. And so we utilise that in our genetic matrix. And so, yeah, net methane yield is our trait that we're trying to improve. And the biggest thing that comes out of that is that the critical relationship is with feed intake. So our improvements in modelling feed intake give us a greater facility to do that. And actually understanding what the cost profile is within the Australian commercial production system is the key part in getting it into the objective. If we can actually properly account for costs, so understand what costs are in different production systems, we can actually reduce methane in that production system without actually having a cost on methane. So the critical part of it is actually having a much better understanding of what the feed costs are in our commercial production systems.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You know, some of the methane relationships are a little counterintuitive, and really looking at it as an efficiency measure of,
yep,
you know, methane produced per kilogram of finished beef or gain at weaning. Really, I think drives us in the right direction. It looks like you're on that kind of track as well. So, great.
Yep.
Very good. I don't see any other questions, but I think, Brad, you're going to hang on to here in case we get some questions through Laura's part too, right?
Yes, Bob.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. I think this is amazing technology. You're literally around the planet in real time, and we appreciate you getting up real early this morning to come be with us, and appreciate you joining the BIF program this year, Brad. Thanks so much.
It's no worries, Bob.
The state of Iowa and Iowa State University are proud to host the 2021 Beef Improvement Federation Annual Research Symposium and Convention. The convention will be located in downtown Des Moines with easy access to the airport, hotels, and local restaurants. Iowa State University is just north with its research and teaching farms. Join us in Iowa and experience how Iowa provides the beef industry with innovation to application.